completely brush what happened under the rug and say, oh, it's just the process. We heard that a lot at our last meeting. Oh, the process is broken. Well, I've talked to a lot of taxpayers, and you tell them, oh, what happened? Oh, there's a problem with the process. That doesn't account for $500,000. And again, there's not money missing, but for a mistake that's the equivalent of $500,000, that I think that in the interest of transparency, that it was important that we said what went wrong. And Mr. Bennett has just done that now, has addressed that's what happened, that's what the problem was. Just by saying that an individual or a certain entity made a mistake is not saying that it's their fault. If it's just like if you get a job to run a cash register and they don't teach you how to run the cash register and your drawer doesn't balance at the end, it's, yes, you're the one that made the mistake, but it's not your fault. It's because you weren't trained in that particular case, or in this case, you were given improper software, and also the system has been broken. So we have addressed, I think, or at least I feel, has been addressed where the mistake was made. That being said, I don't think that was pointing fingers. I think that that is determining what happened. As Mr. Ritter alluded to as well, the system is broken, and by the system being broken, the previous town administrations and positions, we have balanced our budget by using free cash and stabilization to pay people's salaries. That should not be done, and that cannot be done in order to be fiscally healthy. So that is kind of how we're in the situation. Again, as Mr. Ritter said, we could use all of our free cash and stabilization to reduce the amount that we'll have to increase taxes if that's approved or cut. But then the problem remains again next year when we put the budget together, that we still are going to have the shortfall. So we can either continue to engage in this process that got us where we are now and using free cash to close our budget gap, or we can look at either raising taxes or making cuts so that when we go to put the budget together next year, we have free cash, we have stabilization that we can use for one-time problems. This is not a one-time problem. This is a $500,000 overcalculation in the amount that we thought that we'd be able to tax people that we cannot. So this problem will continue to occur.
May I just
Sure.
add a little gloss to that? I pointed out from this exhibit, which people may want to take a look at. We can put it on the website. Of free cash expenditure is $686,000, but to drive your point home further, stabilization funds of $212,000 were used in fiscal 2012 to close this gap. This is a structural deficit in town spending that has used so-called one-time revenues again and again and again to close a gap. It's just reiterating what Ken just said.
I've been on the boards that have passed these budgets, and I have objected to using free cash repeatedly to fill the budget hole, because free cash isn't the same number every year. It can fluctuate. The difference one year, the prior year, between using the 686, it was 200,000. All right? And then the next year was a banner year. I think they got an insurance settlement for some piece of property or something, and it was a very large number. Used every penny of that plus stabilization. It's like you're paying off a credit card by getting another credit card. And it's all come back to bite us right now.
Yes.
I was under the impression that we've already depleted the stabilization account during the last town meeting. Where are these funds coming from that you're looking to use?
The number was, the size of the number was a surprise to me because I thought it was in the $100,000 range. But again, the accountant and the forensic consultant in doing the books have come up with this number.
How much is in the stabilization account now?
I can answer that question a little more clearly. We're moving from one piece of financial accounting software to another piece of financial software accounting. For the differences, it's a problem because they're not the same. The account numbers are not the same. The account structures are not the same. So the number that you had in mind is based on old data and a software package we no longer use. And the number that they are coming up with is, having closed that completely out, moved all balances forward into a new structure, their current estimate, not final, because we aren't there, but current estimate in the new system. It probably takes a lot of small balances here and there and closes them out to stabilization.
How much is in there?
I don't know the end, over $250,000 in several stabilization accounts. It's not one singular account called stabilization. There's capital stabilization, there is general stabilization.
And are you gonna hit all of those different accounts to try and make up this?
No decision's been made.
Was that something that you're talking
That's one of the options. And again, it was alluded to, and by the consultants and the town accountant, that, it's not your best option. However, it may be necessity. Just as some people, out of necessity to keep their house or stuff, they kill their retirement fund because that's their choice. Their choice, they go out and get another job, would be like raising taxes, is they can't find a job. Their only option is to use their retirement. So that's one of our options we have, is to use that money. And that would, help to fix this problem. Come up with the amount of money that we need to come up with to deal with the budget issue of 14. And yes, it was also brought out in that same breath that you will have this issue in 15. So just know going forward, you have to be tighter. But we will also have a different map, if you will, to follow when everything is transferred into the Vadar, which is the accounting software that we're using now, which is a more universally used system, where you can look at it and it will be what you think it is, rather than the cities and towns, which was created and owned by the former town accountant, Scott Sawyer, who, by the way, to be fair, prior to being on the Board of Selectmen, I attended town meetings, pre-town meetings, where an advisory board, when the budget was discussed, and he voiced his opposition, to always using free cash accounting on it, because it's not, you never know what it's going to be each year. It may not be there, a year. You may not have free cash, or it may be very small. But, sometimes when you're an employee, you do, if the powers that be tell you no, use it, well, then he fits it into the formula and makes things work.
I guess I'm a little confused. Can you clarify, in finding the shortfall, you found funds to fund the stabilization?
In taking cities and towns, which is a proprietary system of Scott Sawyer, and he had account numbers and name designations for things, for items, for expenses, for receipts, etc. Transposing that into the Vadar, and I'm
You're doing pretty good.
I'm doing the best that I understand, which is probably about as good as you understand it, or you understand it better than I do. But in making the move over, you had account names, and they had to figure out what these were, because, again, it's a system that was used by a very small number of cities and towns. Pretty sure it's the towns that Scott Sawyer, as an accountant, was an accountant for their city or town. That's the system he used, and no other cities and towns were using it. So he could call a peach an apple, and somebody comes along and looks at that to move it from there into Vadar, would say, oh, that's an apple, so you put it under apple, when in fact it was something else. But it was what he called it. So when we're making the switch, they had to go very painstakingly, and at some things they had to almost guess what that was, or just take that amount of money and create an account number for it and put it in there. And when the advisory board made the budget for fiscal year 2014, they looked at the formula that the way the former accountant set budgets up, assuming you're doing everything right. It always worked before, it should work now. However, it didn't, because you look at something and you say, oh, well, that must be this. However, Mr. Sawyer labeled it as something else. He understood it, he knew what it was, but it's not universally used, so he called it one thing, and Jeff Bennett would call it another thing, and write it down, yep, that's it, and I'm all covered. When in fact, whoops, he labeled his things, you know, I did it alphabetically by last names, he did it alphabetically by first names. I'm assuming that's that, and it's what happened.
I'm just kind of thrown by the fact that this is just being caught now, and when we were going for the initial override, you guys looked at your budget so closely, it wasn't caught or found then.
Part of that is that we're in the middle of 2014, and we're just closing out 2013.
Fiscal year.
We're behind, we're in the middle, you know, and that is my question to the treasurer as soon as we get done with these questions, is where we are in 2014. So,
I just have a couple of questions. When's the last time free cash was certified?
For annual town meeting in May. So it's about March of this year.
And just to explain, without everything being balanced, there's no way to really have the exact figures for the stabilization of the free cash, to get the free cash. I also wanted to then ask, as far as the overlay concerned, because I know you guys are thinking about robbing that, did Fred give you a balance on that?
No.
not a final balance, no.
Okay, because you might want to mention to him that the overlay, as it stands now in the recap sheet, he's got a wrong figure in there.
Okay.
So because I verified this with Luann this morning, and, and there's some other issues in that too, so you might want to talk with her before you guys go read.
Yes.
No, I think this was a system that was gonna fail. And it started failing the minute that you people sat in those seats and we decided to try to fix things. And it's like a Ponzi scheme. Well, you don't have money here, well, we'll snag it from here, we'll fill this one up. Well, that one's, I need it over here, so we'll take it and we'll move it over here. So it's nobody's fault. And I think the reason things were done the way they were was because there really wasn't enough money to do what needed to be done. And instead of coming and saying, we actually need this, I think it was creative financing. And I do think that we were destined to end up in this spot right now. It's really unfortunate because it's nobody's fault. I feel horrible. I know you guys do. We went through a tough time, and here we are, back again. Let's get it fixed, and, we'll be all set. But it's gonna be hard.
And I don't know if this can clarify at all, you don't want to mix the two issues, the $500,000, it's not a shortfall, right, inaccurate assumption of how much we could tax, and then having this extra cash. They're two separate issues that just happen to both come to light and now be resolved
I'm
as.
just shocked we have the extra cash, and we found the extra cash, considering we were gonna lay off all of these town employees if that override didn't go through. I thought that you guys went through all the budgets. You think
right.
that you would've
Well, we would have been in,
questioned those
right, we
accounts?
would have been in the same situation. We can take, it wouldn't have been enough to cover it. Like Mr. Ritter said, we're talking about 250, and we had already,
Before you start
right, so we had,
robbing our pockets, maybe you ought to look at
right.
the budget again.
Well, here's what the issue is. As we've said before during this meeting, the amount of money that we might have is like $250,000. We were talking about needing $600,000. And we use that money this year. Those are one-source funds. Those aren't revenues that are continuing, so all of those people would have been laid off in 6 months instead of now. It's very much like you've lived off of your credit cards for years, and then suddenly you decide you're not going to do that anymore. Well, cuts are going to have to be made. You can use that Visa card one last time to pay out your budget for this year to keep those employees on the payroll, but then once that money's gone, there's absolutely nothing. It's not a renewing source of income that we would continue to have. It's, as was stated, these little pieces of money that kind of were brought together. I'll repeat it just for one last time. What's happened is, and I know people don't want to hear it, but the tax rate in Templeton, we have great services, and I believe the tax rate for years has been kept artificially low in relation to the amount of services you get. So any one politician like select board, national, state level that tells you that they're gonna balance the budget, give you more, and your taxes aren't gonna go up, are lying to you. We're not gonna find $1 million from consolidating, from just efficiencies and things like that. So that's what happened in this town for a long time. People were told that, oh no, we can not raise taxes and continue to give the great services that we give. And that wasn't true, in the sense that it was true, but now we're in the situation where we constantly were using these random little pots of money that would be found to close that gap. And now we cannot do that anymore. We can. I mean, we can close this budget shortfall the same way that Congress tries to, where they pass, a 5-year plan and say, okay, or in this case, it'll probably be a 2-year plan, say, well, we'll use half of the stabilization money that we found and then get the rest through, the other half through an override, or the over half through cuts if that fails. And then next year we'll make the same cuts, and kind of do it that way. There are different combination methods that we can look at, which were much the same that we looked at before when we had to have an override. But there are a lot of ways that we can solve this, but I don't think just using all of our free cash or stabilization, spending it now, and then in 6 months when we're putting together a budget again, being like, okay, now we're gonna lay these people off, is a reasonable or appropriate or responsible solution.
What's that?
Yeah.
Julie?
To go back to what you said about planning, we're in the middle of trying to plan next year's budget, and we don't have stable figures for this year. When you look at what you can raise 2.5% on, okay? I asked the accountant for what 2.5% would be raised on the amount of money that we have now as our base. It's $219,000. That's what 2.5% will get us, okay? So anything that we have that's over that amount of money, 2.5%, if our insurances go up, if we get hit with another charge, we have to cut it from somewhere else, or go for an override, or use free cash. Last year, our free cash was certified at a very low number, because we would change, we were in a transition, and the DOR didn't feel we could back up our numbers. So they only let us certify $100,000, which is, we're pretty sure that there's a lot more than that. But we can't access that money until the DOR certifies it as free cash. So we can't spend it, we can't access it until it is certified by the Department of Revenue. That's nothing that this board can do. I'm not hiding it. I can't tell you how much it is. I just know 100,000 was a very, very low number. And that's all they allowed us to use. Stabilization, when I heard on Friday night that we had 250,000 in stabilization, I'm scratching my head going, we didn't put that much money in there. I know we didn't. So I'm not sure where that number came from. And you're right, we have to look at it and make sure that that is a real number if we're going to present it to the voters at a special town meeting to use it to try to, as one of the solutions to plug the gap. It's all in flux right now. We have more questions than answers. But we're here as a board trying to present this information to you about the situation so that you can be apprised that this is a serious situation. We're halfway through the fiscal year.
I'm just floored
So-
that $225,000 can come out of nowhere and end up in our stabilization account.
I thought we had 130. That's the number I thought we had in stabilization.
Rhea?
Thank you. I think the most, or a number of things that are frightful here, but the most is that nobody understands one software accounting system to another. And until the town has a group, a budget subcommittee, something that will be able to know, the words were, we
balance the budget with free cash, so now 13, we have to find some place for this to go. And instead, when we pass overrides, you put people back to work, and now we may be threatening them with lesser hours or no jobs. I really have to get control of this town budget.
To that point, Rayanne, and it was pointed out Friday night by both the consulting forensic accountant and the town accountant, Fred Aponte, that once the transition is complete, and they've been doing several things at the same time for a couple of reasons. The turnover in the treasury, when the town accountant left in 2012, he did not close out 2012. He left on June 27th and would not close. So, again, it may be hard to accept or hard to visualize how, accountants can't understand this, but that is a small proprietary software accounting system. A man with 16 years' experience looked at it and had questions about what things were called and how they are entered in there. And that is, again, one of the pitfalls of using or going that route, by using a small system that one guy, uses and understands and is allowed to label it. Basically, one or two people doing the budget and keeping the people who were supposed to have checks and balances, the assessors, the town clerk, the treasurer, and we're not allowed to.
Then people who are supposed to have those controls, their job should say, stop. I don't have the information I need. And they should be coming in front of you saying, I don't have it. That's the job descriptions. We hire people to have these checks and balances, and you're telling me the checks and balances just weren't in
Can I
place.
speak to that?
When the powers that be that were sitting at this table at that time were allowing that to happen. That's,
Well, we're in FY 13. I'm looking at people who have been sitting at the table for a number of years. We know what happened in FY 12. So you're budgeting, you're saying you have to close 12, you've got 13, we've already planned 14, put people back full time. It's scary. When you have switches with people, you can call that other person back to work with them, and I think you gotta be careful of Mr. Sawyer's name here, because he did everything the way he knew how to do it. He'll come back and help people.
No, he did not come back.
That is
Excuse
not
me.
and I'm talking to you.
yes, I understand, yes. If you want to speak, raise your hand and go through the chair.
But somebody in this town has to know where the money is.
And again, I am told by the people that are doing this that they are clearing it and getting it on in a form that is widely used and will be plain and open. And again, we are, as you said, we're in the middle, halfway through fiscal year 2014, and we are still not closed out fiscal year 2013. The general ledger, I was talking with a consultant today, he was up to, I think,
April, when I left the office.
was April? Okay, he was in February, I think, or no, December, in the middle of the day, doing 2013. He said he could do a month about an hour, hour and a half. That's the treasurer's, doing the reconciliation of the general ledger. And that's just a fact. It sounds boggling, and I know it's how that could happen, but that is the situation. So my question right now to the treasurer is, and I alluded to this on Friday, 2014, fiscal year 2014. The cash book and the general ledger, just where are we with 2014 as far as from your office?
I can't speak to the general ledger because I haven't reconciled with the accountant.
Okay,
But I can tell you that the cash book is current to date,
okay.
actually through last Friday. It's coming through last Friday. It's not reconciled, but it's current. So
Okay.
it needs to be reconciled. And so that will be my,
So the cash book for
Challenge.
2014 is not reconciled?
it's not reconciled to date. It's partially reconciled. Some of the accounts are reconciled, some of the ones are reconciled, not all. You say, well, why is that so? Well, the amount of work that's in the office, my priorities have shifted. I can tell you that the first 6 months I worked there, I was resolving 2012 problems. I didn't even show up until halfway through 13. So it's that kind of an environment that we live in. I would like to make a comment to address this lady's, if you'll allow me to answer that. I'd like to make 3 points. One of them is we've all talked about not spending free cash and stabilization and all that because it's bad practice. That's true, but we've continued to do it for as long as I've been in town. So it's kind of like running your own house budget right down to the last penny and not leaving any room for wiggle room. Second thing is, we had a whole new finance team. Half the select board, new coordinator, new treasurer, new accountant. No continuity. There's no continuity there. Then we discovered that the tools we were using were broken. So we find ourselves in about a, $500,000 problem, but we have a $13.5 million budget. That's roughly 3%, 4%. I bet you there's few people in this room can tell you how much money they have on their person within 4% right now, empty their pockets. So, the issue is, yes, it's a problem. Yes, it needs to be addressed. How do we get here? Well, figure it out. How we're gonna move forward is we need to communicate with one another instead of having our own little ways of doing things and work together to try to resolve it, so that we all know what's going on instead of some people knowing what's going on and other ones don't. But it's in the grand scheme of things, I think it's a manageable problem, and the reason it's a problem at all is because municipalities work different than other forms of businesses, and so we have to prove things 3 ways to Sunday before we can move forward to the next step. And we're still working on the 2013 proof. And we're ready to talk about the 2015 budget. That's all.
In regards to the fiscal 2014,
Yes.
the responsibilities that have to do with the treasurer's office.
Yep.
You've alluded to that the cash book is up to date, but it's not reconciled.
Correct.
And the general ledger is not up to date either.
I didn't say that. I said that's Fred's business. I don't know what Fred's done.
The-
I haven't reconciled my records with Fred's records. We haven't reconciled together.
Okay.
That should be done.
What I think we need from you, the treasurer's office, is, and I don't need an answer right this second, but I would suggest the report to Jeff Ritter. An estimate or a timeline, because before you know it, May is gonna be here and we're gonna be doing fiscal 15, and we need 14. The treasurer's responsibilities, the treasurer's part, your part, and we can certainly relay this to the town accountant as well, as the tax collector, along with the assessor.
Right, so you have to realize that there are more people than the treasurer involved in setting.
But I'm talking about the treasurer's responsibilities and duties, is the reconciliation of a cash book and a general ledger.
Not the general ledger.
So,
I'm sorry, that's the accountant's job. It's not anything that I can do.
a timeline, an estimate, when the cash book, when your part of the work will be up to date.
You asked for that last,
I asked
a couple of weeks ago, and I'm supposed to deliver that on January
You-
5th.
Well, they're supposed to be
Sixth.
treasurer's report on things, but, and again, I reiterated that I inquired about this on Friday,
That's why I'm
just
here tonight.
an estimate of, where we are. So in the cash book reconciliation
Yep.
for fiscal year 2014, has it been reconciled to date or no?
It's not reconciled to date.
Okay.
It's current. The entries are current to date. All the entries are there. Has to be balanced with the bank statements. Some of that has happened. It hasn't happened for all 38 accounts.
Okay, so as we stand right now, the cash book is not complete. If it's not reconciled, it's not complete.
Okay, if that's fine.
It's like saying my checkbook is reconciled, but it's not.
Okay.
It's just how I read it.
Could I ask
So-
a question?
Julie, and then,
My question is, when is the last month that all of the statements have been reconciled?
Probably August. And
So,
I would like to
like
expect
28 of them,
38.
38, which is part of the problem.
Yes.
So they've all been reconciled. August is the last month where all of those accounts have been
I'm
reconciled.
not even sure if all of the August ones are reconciled, but I'm just expressing the fact that the reconciling the cash book was not one of my priorities initially. If you remember, when we were working with Moody's to try to straighten out that information, I spent several weeks addressing those issues and did not have opportunity to attend to the cash flow. I discussed that with the accountant, and we agreed it was best to put that off. I've asked for.
That was like in April or May,
Yes.
right?
It wasn't April or May, that was, I don't actually remember. I wasn't around that.
All right, never mind.
Yeah, I would think cash book should be a priority now.
Okay.
My opinion. Reconciliations are important.
Here's the part that I find most troubling about the whole situation, is that, so part of tonight's purpose was to kind of try to, at least in my mind, come to a resolution as to what we're going to do. Because as was the case previously, without this being fixed and this gap in our budget, we're continuing to overspend. We're halfway through the fiscal year. So the cuts are gonna have to be greater than what they would be over the term of the whole year, because we have overspent unknowingly. I just don't know how, how do we come up with a solution when we don't even know how much we are behind or in the hole or what the shortfall is? And there's no easy way to say, okay, well, go figure that out tonight and tell us tomorrow either. So I don't even know as a foundation moving forward what we would, because until free cash is certified, we don't even know if we can use any of that or how much there will be. Obviously, before we can go for an override or present warrants for a special town meeting, we would have to know, I guess we don't have to know the exact amount. If it's a special town meeting, we can kind of add it in the motion. But we would like to have some general idea as to what these figures are. Obviously, we'll have to know what they are if an override is going to be part of this solution. And anything in that time frame is going to be at least a month out as it is. So we're going to be, into February before we could even possibly have, and there's only 5 months left of the fiscal year at that point. So there's a sense of urgency. We need to do something, but we don't even have the foundation with which to really act.
Right. Could I speak to that?
I'm gonna answer,
Okay.
yes.
To touch on what he's saying, I absolutely agree with you. How can we throw out a number of $505,000 when you don't even know where you stand? And again, I'm going back to these bogus accounts. I'm really thrown by that. Do you happen to know it off the top of your head the names of these bogus accounts? I'm just surprised that you guys who've been sitting there on this board for a number of years, looking at this budget, never saw or questioned those
could you be more specific when you say bogus? Could you define that, please, in a financial way? So that we can maybe be able to comprehend.
The way that Jeff referred to them.
Did you call them bogus
I did not
accounts?
call them bogus. They
Oh,
are,
okay.
like I said, their account numbers and entries that were named or
What were they named?
I don't know, I'm not an accountant. In the system, as he was transferring information from one ledger to another, the numbers and some items he did not recognize and weren't sure of what they actually were. And I think where we are in fiscal 2014, but the free cash is for the previous year, fiscal 2013. Because fiscal year 14 started July 1st, 2013.
They weren't recognized or accounted for, but yet nobody's gonna be held accountable.
Accountable how? A mistake was made, a mistake was made. An error is an error. I understand. And that was a question that was also brought up. Why aren't we holding this person accountable? Why don't we take him to court? Why don't we do this? It's,
Yeah, we don't.
that was one, I mean, even if you could prove it was something intentionally illegal to go out and prove that, you would have to win. And the amount of money that you may spend and not do it, it's actually not worth it. We have a problem. It was an error made in making out the budget by using a system, and you thought it said this and this, when actually the person who was doing it called it A and B instead of C and D. And that's basically what happened. If you want, we could try to get the accountant and you could meet with him and he could explain it to you far better than I know I can. And no one was more surprised by that number than I. The number that I saw through emails and when I came back in this summer was one number, and now I heard that number, and where did that come from? And it was in the transposing of information from one system to another. And it was also discussed that with one or two or three individuals having control over the budget and the entities that are supposed to do it, and some of it by law, were not allowed to do it, or were just sitting there rubber stamping it, and this is what happens. And some of the suggestions by the consultant was the team, the people, the assessor, the treasurer, the accountant, the tax collector, and someone besides the part-time volunteer board, a financial overseer or director, to be day-to-day involved with that group. So they are all doing their responsibilities, and the budget process is more open and done the way it was designed and supposed to be done, rather than behind closed doors with a couple people doing it. And we can sit here all day and say this, him, her, and we are still back at square one and still back with this problem. And when we know definitively the amounts and how it happened, I will put that information out at a Board of Selectmen's meeting. I have no problem doing that. It's just we have to know exactly where we are. We know we're told that it's going to be more than what we thought, but we do not have, like free cash, we do not have an exact number. And it's not going to be until we close 2013, which will be in January sometime, perhaps a little sooner, but because of the holidays and everything, it has to go to the DOR and they have to certify it. And then we will know. And so,
I got lost somewhere. Is the cash been certified for 2013
No,
The free cash?
Free cash?
No.
No, not the free cash. Has
No.
has the treasurer and the accountant reconciled for 2013?
No, we're still in August.
No.
For 2013, he hasn't. You are aware on the recap sheet that is supposed to be done by September 30.
that's correct.
Yes. This is part
And I
of,
think had that been done and then things progressed, then we would have probably known things sooner.
Julie, and then,
I would like to get back to what Ken is bringing up, like, what are we going to do about it? Because the longer we wait, the worse the problem will get. We can't keep spending and proceeding business as usual with our budget when we know it's this far out of whack, or estimated to be this far out of whack. I think one of the things that we can do tonight is to vote to freeze expenses and freeze hiring, just as a start, as a stopgap, until we can get some firm numbers and proceed from there. That's the only thing I can think of at this point in time.
but, because, go ahead.
Oh, I just
Anybody
want
else have-
to, I want to say
Go ahead.
as well, just so people know too, the severity of the situation as well. The advice that we got both from DOR and from the forensic accountant was to cut $505,000 from our budget. And then if it turns out we have money to put back in, then do it then. So like obviously that's not what would be the best thing to do, lay off people, from a town management standpoint. But that is what they are suggesting to us to do. So I think that's kind of the source of some of the turmoil that at least I have, as well as knowing that's what the first line answer is, when that isn't what I think that we should do, that we need to kind of, put together, cobble something together in a way, even if it totals 505, so maybe a $200,000 override, $300,000 of cuts, something to get the ball rolling, and then we can always back off of the cuts if we have the free cash, or not necessarily tonight, but within the next meeting.
It's imperative that 13 gets closed and
Oh,
free
right.
cash gets certified. But the forensic accountant and our accountant also said not to wait for free cash.
Yeah.
So if we have a special town meeting, we'll probably look at some combination of cuts and using the money that we were told we had by the DOR, which was $250,000 in stabilization. So, and look at all of the other accounts and all the other data that we have, budgets to actual, and make recommendations from that.
So, that is where we generally stand. That's, I know it sounds, and that's how we got here. And the 14, the issue with 14 is people looked at a model that they thought was correct, and they used it, and it was not. And again, it appears anyway that it was how things were set up. One person set it up their way, and they knew what everything stood for, and where everything was assigned. And if you look at it and say, oh, so that's this, again, apparently it wasn't. It wasn't what people thought it was, and they used it as a model for a budget, and they assumed things that what they read, and it was wrong. And so it's messed up the process. And with an experienced treasurer leaving, and the accountant who knew how all that stuff was set up left pretty much at the same time. And then this goes back to 12 not being closed, so it wasn't like 12 got closed, in a week. we had to get an accountant, he had to go through that and make, figure out what was what, and we've been behind the 8 ball for, a couple of years. And as soon as like I said, we're trying to close out 13, deal with 14, and get all of the town's books under the Vadar system. And once that is all entered and all done, then, and this is from the accountant and the consultant, that then things will be clear and the process will work as designed. We have the same situation as they have in other, things where, there's, pick a company, there's, Enron, Tyco, Chase Manhattan, it's just, chief financial officers and things get out of hand, and then it takes time to clear it up. And not everybody is municipal accounting, experts. I know, I certainly am not.
I know I'm not.
So,
Get a government bailout.
we can only do, or work with the information that we're given by the people that know and understand this. And when they say they have had to figure things out from the old system, I think that says something about how that system was allowed to run. And it's just not something that happened, yesterday or last month. This has been, I think, a long process, and the cards finally fell apart. And it's not going to be easy or fun to fix. I'm going to take a couple more questions, then we're going to have to move on. Bob?
I'm just got annoyed with a couple of people making comments about the number of years that the board members have been here, and like pointing the finger at this board. From what I'm seeing down there, I see the majority of the board has only been here a couple of years, and the one that's been here the longest pointed out many, many times that these were bad practices that we were using, and this board had nothing to do with allowing the creative financing that went on and bought us a wonderful 52 Baldwin Road and created a number of problems that this board is now dealing with. Sitting here pointing the fingers at this board and saying that they've been here a number of years is really what's bogus.
Well, unfortunately, or however you want to look at it, doesn't matter who created the mess, how it got there. We're the ones sitting here now, and we're the ones that have to deal with it, and we're the ones that have to take the heat. And if people are bent on pointing fingers and everything, I'm the sitting chair of the board, so you can point them at me if you have to point fingers. You're free to fire me, you're free to recall me, you're free to do whatever you wish. I serve at your convenience if you think that will solve the problem. But, yeah, again, it's not going to be easy to fix. It's not going to be fun. But this board has been told by the people who do this a lot. Our forensic accountant does this for many other towns. He finds problems in other towns, and he has assured us that once the books are closed and clean, moving forward, when everything is in Vadar, then this should not happen again, because numbers will be there in the clear, and the model for budgets will be there, and everyone will understand them who's doing the process. And I intend to take DOR up on their offer. We may have to send people to there because they said they offered to train people and to show this budget process, but we can't come to your meetings, we can't come to your town you have to come out here to Springfield. So it may be worth the money, not may, it will be worth the money, whatever it is. It shouldn't be a lot, but to pay people to drive to Springfield to do those classes. I know the assessor, the deputy assessor, Luann Royer, has said she's gonna be first in line for that training. So she, one, knows her part, and two, she gets the training on the whole process from DOR. Dave?
Well, you answered
That-
you answered part of my question by saying that. You know, in my department, I'm in charge. When things go bad, I'm in charge and I'm responsible. I've heard some of your employees saying, I can't get this done, I can't get that done. Dan's office needs help. Why aren't we sending some help in there? We're in a crisis mode. As a department head that went out openly for the override, my phone is already ringing with frustrated residents saying, what is going on? It's very frustrating. My employees, I mean, I walked in this morning and my guys were waiting for me, wanting to know what's going on. You know, it's very, very frustrating. We need to come up with a plan, a workable plan, rapidly. This problem's gonna get worse as we go on. It's very difficult for us to deal with as administrators. Face the public and say, oh, the system's broken. Well, I will say as a department head, I knew Scott Sawyer very well and worked with him for a number of years. I know what every account member of my department holds, what the names are and what they were for. So someone needs to start asking questions, because if you don't know where your money is, go to your department heads, because they know exactly what it is.
Well, you would think.
Well, they should be. Shame on them if they don't.
But again, the thing was the budget, taking into account like this model. You know, if you have an outline and you follow that outline and that outline does not say what you think it says.
I will tell you what it smells of, cover us, and that's what I hear from people.
What, a cover up what?
I don't know what,
Okay.
but that's what it smells like.
It stinks.
It may stink, and if you want to hear names, if you want to hear accusations, you can do that, but it's not going to solve the problem, and I'm not going to do it. I just said, if you want to blame somebody, you want to point a finger, point it right here at me, because I'm the sitting chairman of the board.
You're in charge.
So, you know, point your finger at me,
If we're covering up, why are we meeting here?
but,
Why are we doing this?
no, we got to, we
I
could
have-
go on all night here.
I just want to make
See,
two
go ahead.
motions. I'd like to make a motion that we freeze all expenses and hiring from this point forward.
A second.
All right. Motion made to freeze hiring and expenses and seconded. Any discussion? Bethany and then Diane.
I just wanted to agree with Julie, and the only other caution I wanted to make was, we've waited this long to close 13 if we're only a couple weeks away, rather than make decisions and, start talking about cuts. I would rather wait. As a department head, I would rather wait. I don't want to see my employees be used as yo-yos. There was one comment about making the cuts and then seeing what happens and then backfilling. That's what's gone on, and I don't think it's appropriate to do that with our employees. So I'd rather start by freezing hiring, freezing spending, waiting to see what free cash comes out to be, and then you guys coming up with a plan that the community can vote on. That's what I'd like to see as a department head.
Just to your comment, it's not, we haven't been waiting to close 13. It's been in the
Oh, yes.
process for a long time.
I understand that, but as a department head, I've been waiting, and I mean, if we're now only 3 weeks away, then that seems like a darn close time.
Because part of the work in the treasurer's office was so far behind for
Oh, I agree, I absolutely agree.
time, and the sitting treasurer now came into behind,
Mhm.
and a lot of issues, taxes, this, that, all kinds of parts of that office's responsibility had, you know, fallen by, and playing catch-up.
I agree, yes.
And the second consultant we have, you know, doing that, some of that work to catch up, to help. And there have been people, and one of them sitting here tonight has done, you know, cash book stuff, general ledger. We've had it outside of the treasurer's office doing payroll. there's been many approaches to try to catch everything up
And
as
I wasn't
quickly as
challenging that.
possible, at the same time going into a new system, which, by the way, was just what voted this past town meeting, so that's when that process began.
And I wasn't challenging
It
that.
didn't
I was
begin
just
2
saying
years
that-
ago, transposing that one system over to another. We worked within cities and towns for a year, getting payroll and getting the bills paid, and some of the stuff, just by the nature that there was, oh, by the way, a volunteer doing it, with some assistance from the former accountant, but again, that was piecemeal, trying to keep the town afloat and going forward, while we were trying to find a treasurer and accountant to work within the small budget that we had to work with.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, I wasn't challenging that at
No,
all.
I
I
understand.
was agreeing with Julie's first step, and my thought is that maybe the second step could be waiting until FY
It was-
13 is closed.
It was just for clarification,
Oh,
Bethany,
okay.
that, you say, someone hears, oh, they're waiting. And I
Oh,
just want
I
to clarify,
didn't mean it that
we're
way.
not waiting. It was
Yeah.
just multiple things that can't happen overnight. I mean, enough mistakes were made. You don't want more just by you want to get this done as fast as possible. Sometimes you slow down, stop, calm down, and work through the problem. Again, my opinion is finger pointing is not going to solve it, and I'll speak for myself. We're not trying to cover anything up. I just don't want to rush to point. I just want to solve the problem.
I do as well.
And while solving it, we lay things out so that it's very hard for it to be repeated going down the road. Because I don't want to hand that off to whoever may be sitting here in May, whether it's me or someone else. I just don't want to hand that off to them. And I'd like it as clean and as clear as possible moving forward for the board and for the employees, the people, the collector, the treasurer, the accountant, and so forth. And for the taxpayers. Diane?
I was just gonna pretty much reiterate what Bethany said about agreeing with Julie about kind of putting, a stop to what's going on, but I do want to ask, I thought that the town coordinator was possibly receiving a new position, and if you put a highs on if you put a freeze on hiring, we can't live without that position. So to just blanket that's really my question to you, is to not justify that. I think that that's needed, but my concern is also that we're only through August. We've only been reconciled through August, and it's December. So if Mr. Keeney needs some help, I mean, wow, that's ways to be behind. And that should definitely be addressed immediately. That's a large concern. So if we could address that and,
As I
to
said.
help you get out of it, everybody, I mean, the taxpayer, that's tough.
There has been help, there has been outside people.
But it's not enough if we're
There
only in
is-
August, is that normal?
There has been a secretary in the Board of Selectmen's office doing the cash book. There was a secretary outside of the treasurer's office doing payroll.
Then why is he still in his position?
There
Well,
is,
Yeah, that seems tough. Well, at any rate, I'm not gonna
And-
belabor that point. I just wanna say about if the town coordinator is gonna accept a new position and you ratify to, or certify to freeze everything, then you're not gonna be able to hire anyone because that's what we just did. So, that's all.
and you also understand that